Yeah, go ahead.
Hey. Hi, everyone. My name is Colleen Hill. I'm the senior aquarist with Oregon Sea Grants Aquatic Animal Health Program at Hatfield Marine Science Center. Every year we put on these internship presentations. We have interns that join us throughout the year, but mainly spring and summer. We do these presentations yearly, usually in our Gwynn Library at Hatfield, but this is our first time doing it on this platform on Zoom, so this is exciting. We can hopefully get more people involved and see what we do. There's a few reasons we do these presentations, and first of all, it's for our students so they can get public speaking experience. They work on all kinds of things while they're here, and they learn things. It's to let them talk about it and maybe discuss a project that they may have worked hard on. Also, it's to introduce what we do as aquarists to our colleagues. We have three people today. Sorry, we're going to start with Jamie Hart, then go on to Haley Aronson, and then Mina Grant has a presentation that is recorded. She couldn't join us today. Jamie was our intern in spring this year. Haley and Mina were our internships this summer. And I want to say that probably our internships make up the most of our volunteer hours that help us out with our programs. And as a whole, on average, every year, our volunteer and internship hours count as 1.5 or 1.25 full-time people. And that's a huge amount of work time devoted to our departments because it is a very small staff. So we have our interns this summer, and they're gonna talk to you about their projects and actually hit on the highlights of what it means to be an internship during COVID, because that was actually another very important reason we had interns this year. They are essential staff to us. And when COVID hit, it was nice to have people who are already trained in our departments, and our interns were, so we could keep them on and keep them working, and it was very helpful to us. So we're going to start with Jamie. I'm going to have each intern aquarist give you a quick little introduction before they start their presentations. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint real quick. And okay, hopefully that's not blocking anything. Well, hello, my name is Jamie Hart, and I recently graduated the Aquarium Science program at the Oregon Coast Community College and was lucky enough to secure an internship at the Hatfield Marine Science Center as the Education Lab Aquarist. And for my internship presentation, I would like to highlight some of the projects I was fortunate enough to work on during that time. Just a quick overview of my responsibilities. I had 15 cold water systems located in the education wing, as well as a few exhibits located in the visitor center, such as the touch pools and 3 of the Project Piaba freshwater exhibits. Probably my favorite exhibit I got to work with were the Project Piaba tanks located in the visitor center. There are 3 freshwater exhibits. This one's Piaba 1, Piaba 2, and Piaba 3. It was actually on one of my first days at Hatfield. Colleen was showing me around and introducing me to all the exhibits when we noticed an angelfish in Piaba 2 had laid eggs. You can see them on the filter here in the background. So that became my focus for the next couple of weeks. They quickly hatched and became free swimming. They were on a diet of newly hatched brine shrimp until they were big enough to take in bigger foods like your standard flake mix, frozen Daphnia, or gel foods. It wasn't until later, when I was more settled into the routine of things and we had our 2nd or 3rd egg laying event, that I was able to determine a timeline of the fry from egg to free swimming. And it turns out it took approximately 5 days from when they were laid until they were hatched, and then an additional 5 days until they were actually free swimming. You can kind of see in this picture that they are just gently resting on that piece of driftwood. The female angelfish would spend a lot of time just gently taking them into her mouth and depositing them back onto the driftwood where she wanted them. Even after they were fully capable and free swimming, if guests or myself would get too close, she would round them up in her mouth and move them away. So we did end up putting up a sign in front of this exhibit reminding guests to keep their distance and observe from afar to reduce stress on the fish during this time. At some point, the female would become super protective of her young and start to pick on the male. It seemed to happen around the time the young angelfish were about the size of a dime. So we would remove the male entirely until the juvenile angelfish were big enough to be moved into a different exhibit to reduce the overall stress of the adult angelfish. By the third batch of angelfish babies, we opted to leave out feeding the freshly hatched brine shrimp altogether from their diet. There was a high chance they would digest any unhatched cyst located in our brine shrimp culture that we were feeding them, which could cause digestive problems. And then just because brine shrimp isn't all that nutritious in general, we really wanted to try something more beneficial. And let's face it, also something easier than having to harvest freshly hatched brine shrimp multiple times a day. Instead, we opted to feed them with a gel food still in its powder form, which they picked up and thrived on, thus eliminating the need for brine shrimp altogether for rearing our angelfish. We eventually found a fine granulated food, specially formulated for fish larvae, and started using that for all of our newly hatched angelfish. If anyone is in the business of raising larval fish, I do highly recommend Dr. Bassler's Biofish food. It's great. Around that same time, we started to transition using live plants in our freshwater systems. I was really excited to get rid of the plastic plants and replace them with live ones because I personally just don't think plastic plants look very natural. We have a couple of silk plants that were really beautiful, but they are really delicate and did get pretty beat up during the cleaning and disinfecting process. So here's a picture of Piaba 2 after replacing some of the plastic plants with some Amazon swords and a dwarf Sagittaria. It may not seem like a huge deal to introduce live plants to an aquarium, but each system is going to be different and each plant is going to thrive differently depending on the light conditions in that system and the animals present in the exhibit. So this setup has changed quite a few times since we started introducing live plants. The angelfish would uproot any type of hair grass we tried to put in there, so I changed the setup quite a few times before we settled on these types of plants, which have been doing pretty well. This is Piaba 1. You can see on the left, those are the silk plants I was mentioning. They do look natural and aesthetically pleasing, but the leaves on these plants are starting to fray at the ends just from cleaning and would get dirty pretty quickly. The picture on the right is the final layout of the plants. It's grown quite a bit since I took this picture, but I didn't have to do much aquascaping on this system as these plants thrived pretty much exactly where we introduced them. And it's turned out to be less maintenance dealing with live plants in these particular systems than having to deal with plastic plants, in my opinion. But like I said, each system is going to be different and have its own issues. I just happened to get lucky with these being pretty low maintenance live plants tanks, and they turned out to look pretty good. This is one of the 2 education labs I was responsible for maintaining and doing basic daily animal husbandry in. It's home to a host of cold water invertebrates used for educational purposes, and I was tasked with replumbing the seawater inflow for both labs. So on the left here, you can see all the old PVC that would need to be replaced. Some of the concerns we had with this existing setup was that the outflow of seawater into the tanks is pretty high up above the water line, which resulted in a lot of splashing, which could lead to cross-contamination between the systems. And of course, with splashing, you're going to get a lot of salt creep build up around the edges of these tanks. So a lot of time is just spent cleaning the excess of salt. So I wanted to design something that would help eliminate some of these problems. So I got to work. I started with welding together each of the valve placements for the overflows first. That way, when I was ready to shut off the seawater, I could quickly plumb everything together, weld it, and the animals in the education lab would be without running seawater for the shortest amount of time possible. Here's a picture of the completed project. I was able to angle the outflows downwards. That way they had direct contact with the water line, meaning we had greatly reduced any splashing or cross-contamination. It also greatly reduced the noise factor in the lab space because we got rid of that splashing. And last but not least, it meant less daily cleanup for salt-free for the aquarists, which is a win. These are just some additional close-up pictures I had. In one of the labs, we also have a quarantine tank we use for the introduction of new animals that have been collected. They stay in the system for a minimum of 30 to 60 days as they are monitored for any signs of illness or disease. As you can see, the existing setup we had was starting to show its age. It was also really tall, which made it quite a challenge to collect smaller animals like hermit crabs from the bottom of the tank, especially when the tank was full. So you would typically have to drain half the seawater in order to better collect the animals from it. This is the new quarantine system I got to install and plumb in. It's much shorter, making it easier to reach the bottom of the tank. And the stand was repurposed from a combination of Schedule 40 and Schedule 80 PVC pipe fittings they had left over from a previous project. I basically got the go-ahead to just find and gather up everything I needed to make an improved quarantine tank. And although I do think somewhere down the line, a better, more permanent stand can be achieved than what I have right here, I was still quite proud of my little repurposed project here. And I guess I did okay with the Education Lab plumbing project because I got to help out with plumbing this seawater access line located in the West Wing. We did have big plans to completely plumb and get the hospital quarantine room up and running again. But as you can see from my picture, COVID-19 was in charge and our plans were put on hold for a bit. But we did manage to get this started so we could have an easier access point to pull seawater from when we needed. The most recent project I got to work on was plumbing in the soon-to-be crab exhibit in the visitor center. This is what it currently looks like from the outside. They still have to add graphics and decals and everything, but we were able to start our plumbing without interfering with any of that. This is behind the scenes where all the plumbing would take place. There are 4 separate exhibit tanks that would need to be plumbed for seawater inflow and of course overflow. On the bottom right, you can see that true union valve peeking out, and that's where we would be pulling our seawater from, and also the trench where our seawater overflow would drain into. I would start at this end, while Sid started at the opposite end of this room so we could maintain proper distance and just generally not get in each other's way while we were plumbing and measuring things out. Here is the final result after 2 days working alongside my colleague. This project was a bit more technically difficult than the one I accomplished in the Ed Lab, so I'm really thankful I got to be a part of it and grateful I didn't have to do it alone also. Trying to line up the corners of this wall with our fittings was pretty challenging, but we worked slowly and often consulted with each other to make sure we didn't rush or waste a perfectly good fitting by making a quick mistake. I didn't really expect to be doing a bunch of life support projects in plumbing for my internship, but I'm really glad that it turned out that way because I'm so much more confident in my abilities now than I was when I started, and I'm going to carry these skills with me wherever I go. So I am truly grateful I got to do this. And of course, a special thanks to Dr. Tim, Colleen, and Sid, who made me feel like I belonged there the moment I started. Realizing I was going to be doing my internship during the pandemic instead of a normal operation was at first a bit of a letdown. I was sad about it, but I thought I would miss out on doing a decent amount of projects, but with their guidance and support, I got to do some pretty wonderful things. I wasn't able to mention everything due to the time constraints, but I got to experience so many different levels of animal husbandry that I truly am grateful for the time I had here. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh, are we just transitioning to the next person? Sorry about that.
I think so, Haley.
Okay.
Next. Thank
Yes. Sorry. Like, I was waiting for the silence to break, but I shall break it. Here we are. Let me do Asian share. Okay. So, my name is Haley Aronson. I am another very fortunate person who was able to, there we are, who was able to be an intern here at Hatfield during the summer. As I'm sure all of you are aware and very tired of hearing about COVID, a lot of places closed down to volunteers, interns, and to new hires as well. So very fortunate that I was able to get a lot of really great experience over my summer, and even more fortunate that it happened here at Hatfield. You already saw Jamie's presentation, but every member of the staff here at Hatfield is extremely passionate about what they do and invested not only in their work, but in helping people like me learn more and become accomplished in the areas that I want to be accomplished in and be a better aquarist overall. So really lucky to be here and tell you a little bit about some of the projects that I've been able to do over my summer. So I'm really going to cover three things. First one is just going over some of the medical treatments I've learned while here, then going into an aquaponics system that we worked on, and then into a crab welfare project that I was able to do. Medical treatments. So my intent coming into this internship this summer is to learn more about aquatic medicine. Learning about the signs and symptoms of different diseases and being able to go in and treat them with confidence is something that I, fortunately for me, I guess unfortunately so much for the critters, I was able to learn how to do. During summertime, natural stressors are just elevated. We pull natural salt water, there's higher temperatures and normally higher gust loads. But that higher temperature really influences water chemistry and parasite loads. So it just goes from what's normally there all year to an elevated amount in the summer that we have to maintain. So a lot of what I did was maintenance medical work. This is an image of that. I have sedated this rockfish and I'm picking leeches off of it, which sounds really gross. It is so satisfying. I'm not going to get into it because that would be the whole presentation. But picking leeches off of these rockfish was incredibly satisfying, and being confident sedating animals on my own is a huge accomplishment for me. I'm just going to go through a few more, but I also learned how to treat animals in larger groups. So these two blue totes up in the left-hand corner are full of juvenile rockfish that have beginning stages of some external parasites as well, and learned how to treat them while keeping the temperature nice and stabilized thanks to Jamie's plumbing. Down below are two of our inverts from the touch pools that, just with extra stressors from environmental conditions and then some bullying from tank mates, they came back for a little TLC, a little bit of a medical bath just to get them back up and going. Another one was working with our giant Pacific octopuses. So we have a matrix here at Hatfield where we go through, and every time we interact with them, we are able to distinguish signs of healthy behaviors and signs of stress behaviors. And knowing at what level to be concerned, how often, and knowing here that people are so devoted to releasing these animals when those stressors are seen was invaluable. I was part of two releases this summer, and having that confidence to go into an animal that is so complicated and intelligent, really invaluable experience. The last one I want to talk about is a really interesting medical case. We have a red urchin here from our touch pool, and this is the beginning picture, so this one down here on July 7th, where you can see the tissue on the spines has gone necrotic, it's receded, and filamentous algae has grown on it. So this looks really gnarly, but this, to a smaller extent, has been seen during summertime in these red urchins, and it was always thought that it was due to constant poking and prodding from eager little hands. Without those hands in the water, though, seeing this happen, we had to look at some other kinds of stressors that are going on potentially. I still don't know why this individual had such a severe reaction, but we've been testing water quality every week, and we're hoping to get some metal testing going on. Invertebrates are very sensitive to metals in the water, and pulling from that bay could potentially be a factor. But this individual, it's a happy ending. I know that I didn't show the full range of pictures, but This animal is doing very well right now. It came in looking pretty rough, but pulled it into hospital quarantine, gave it a few medical baths. And you can see here the spines that were covered in algae are white here. They were gradually dropped, pinched off. You can see this is kind of the mid-range picture where it's healing very well. And then over on right-hand corner is, you can see the tips of those spines are a nice healthy red color. So this individual is doing very well. It was a great recovery, and hope to unravel this mystery very soon. Aquaponics. So this was an extremely gratifying project to work on. I did not have a lot of freshwater fish experience. I had no turtle experience, and all attempts at growing plants in the past ended in complete failure. So all around, this project was very rewarding, very quick results. And, you know, we're still working on some bits and pieces where learning the exact environment where we can get the best growth for our plants, the different kinds of plants that we grow, maybe trying some new seeds, and also getting our little sunshine turtle over there to eat their veggies. Hurdles to cross, and I know that we are very close because leaps and bounds have happened since the beginning. This left-hand corner is at the very beginning of this project, so early July, late June is when we started to plant our little sprouts that we had grown on the side into the system. On the right-hand side is sort of that mid to late July, some good progress there. And then this bottom picture is one I took just the other day. So the height of the lights has not changed. Just to give you an idea of this forest that we have created. We have created a beautiful garden. We have fruiting bodies. We have some peas growing in the back. We have blossoms. We have an okra blossom, which I'll show you at the end. All of the vegetables are doing just so well. And it's all on 3 koi and a turtle. So pretty close to magic, in my opinion. Really looking forward to battling this, battling this plant life in the future too. Crab welfare. This was definitely the most challenging for me because how do you tell if a crab is stressed? They're pretty stoic. I don't know if you've come face to face with a crab. Hard to read, some of them. What I have gained over the course of this time is a lot of it stems from knowing the biology of these individual species, and also having time working with a given species, a population, or an individual over time, and understanding what their normal is to be able to understand what abnormal is and have that initial response. I came into this with some limited information on their biology. I educated myself on that, but had very limited experience working with them in an aquarium. And so I wanted to try and create a way for people like me who aren't as familiar with these animals to be able to pick up on at least some warning signs. Created a checklist, and I'm going to try and show all of you, and we're going to see how that works. But, so this is the checklist. I hope you can all see my Google Sheets, correct? Nope, okie dokie.
Nope.
Well then, let's see.
I'll have to share a different screen.
Yeah, sorry. I know this happens inevitably every single Zoom conversation, but there we go. There we go, there we go. Technical difficulties.
There you go, yeah.
Now is the sheet, lovely. Okay. So this is what I came up with. This is very much a living document. I want as many eyes and heads together on this project and on invertebrate welfare in general, because I really hadn't paid that close of attention other than with octopuses that are very expressive. Invertebrate welfare often just unintentionally becomes very much a side thing compared to animals like your fish, mammals, birds, and again, kind of the more responsive invertebrates. But this is a great exercise for me. A lot of it is proper documentation. I have here just who is doing this, what is the date, so on, some very general postures and behaviors, and going from a scale of 1 to 4. Time is obviously a big factor for animals in colder water and in warm water, but colder water, it'll take much longer for some of these symptoms to show aggravation. So making sure to take that into account if you see the same behavior multiple times. Going back through past health checks, going through results of blood draws in the past, general health management, and then water quality, as I said, is a huge factor for invertebrates. So going through making sure you know that what kind of food was offered, how much it ate, those kinds of things. And at least if you're not sure if it's something to worry about or not, you can take this to someone who will, a higher up, a vet, so on. But that was my goal. Hopefully I managed to accomplish that with this, but fortunately, again, I work with people who are very competent and very engaged in pursuing animal welfare in all forms. So that is my presentation. Thank you very much from all of us. And these are my references. And this is our okra flower. In case you haven't seen one, they're beautiful. That's all for me.
Thanks, Haley. I am going. Okay, let me see if I can get going here. Here we go.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina Grant and I used to be the Visitor Center aquarist at Hatfield up until recently. I unfortunately can't be there for the meeting tomorrow at 10, and so I've recorded this whole presentation and all you have to do is listen. But this is just about my time that I spent down at Hatfield. So a little about me. I graduated from the University of Hawaii Hilo with my bachelor's degree in marine science, and then later that year I interned at the High Desert Museum in Bend, Oregon, where I was working with mammals, reptiles, birds of prey, and even a little bit of fish. And around September, later that summer, I got hired to be the Visitor Center aquarist, and that's where I was up until this past July, where I got hired to be seasonal back at the High Desert Museum. The big takeaways that I gained from working at Hatfield was looking at animal welfare. Daily health checks, we would check on the animals every morning and before we would clock out. And when you're doing your AM rounds, it doesn't just include looking at the animal, you're also looking at the system itself, you're looking at life support. If you do need to take water quality, you're looking at those parameters, any maintenance on the systems or life support, we would do. If we did find something wrong, we would administer any medical treatments. We would perform necropsies, and specifically for the GPO, we would get weights on her. We would monitor her behavior, provoked and unprovoked behavior using the matrix, and there's a lot that goes into animal welfare. And personally, I think it includes the health of the animal, but also enrichment and trainings and things like that. So it's not just the health of the animal. And that's one of the greatest takeaways I got from working at Hatfield, and probably why I centered a lot of my internship projects around welfare, just because I was so interested in it, and I learned so much, by working at Hatfield. One of the biggest challenges I faced as a visitor center aquarist was maintaining this population of bay pipefish. They are extremely sensitive. You look at them wrong and they go down. Typically, they would get this bacterial infection that would present itself at the base of the caudal fin, and it's so aggressive. I mean, it would just move up the tail, and 3 days in, this fish just had so much necrotic tissue, it would go off feed, wouldn't eat, and there was no way to recover it. It was too far gone. And looking back in the records, you notice every tank breakdown or transports between tanks, there was a pretty significant die-off. And historically, Hatfield hasn't been able to recover any of these animals that had this infection. And so I talked to Dr. Tim. We got a histopathology report, but of course I wasn't even there to complete that portion of my project. But hopefully the next BC Aquarius can look back and those records will be readily available for them. But being able to maintain this population was definitely something that I wanted to accomplish. And if I couldn't accomplish it, then make it so that the next person could, because I hated seeing these fish die off. So this pipefish handbook that I keep talking about, it basically details the intricate care and the maintenance of a healthy population of big pipefish. It includes medical treatments that I found to be useful. It includes proactive management, making sure that you're keeping up with your husbandry practices and your system maintenance, and even transport procedures. If you're using a net to catch these pipefish, you can actually, compromise them for at least a month, 3 days, and that's pretty significant when you already have a very delicate, sensitive species. And so, being very cautious about transportation could mean, life or death, really, for these animals. But this handbook also includes professional advice that I've gathered from the Aquatic Info Listserv. That is a great resource for aquarists to use, because you just send out a question and you get people, professionals in the industry answering back, telling you what's been successful from all over the country. And it's all free, you just send in your question, and it's such a wonderful resource to have, and I'm so grateful for it. Honestly, I'm not really sure where I would be without it in my journey of, taking care of pipefish. So continuing on with the pipefish handbook, I just wanted to throw out some more visuals. So in the picture above, we have a pipefish wound that was debrided with chlorhexidine and treated with SSD. And then the bottom picture is actually a tool that I tried to come up with to catch pipefish without actually netting them. And so I just got this picture and zip tied it to a PVC pipe. So another really cool project that I was involved with at Hatfield was a giant Pacific octopus enrichment project. And basically we painted with Mr. Potato Head, which I think is pretty cool. So you might be wondering, how did you paint with an octopus? Basically, my predecessor from 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, created this PVC pipe contraption that was attached to a handle through a bungee system, and Mr. Potato Head was attached, where the octopus is currently. You can see in the video. And we would freeze Mr. Potato Head in clam juice, so it was really appetizing, really get the GPO's attention for a while. And we would attach a canvas using clamps, and we would coat the paint brushes with paint, and we stood by, replenish the paint as needed. It was really interesting to see how her behavior would change. It was almost as if she knew. Every Monday, we would bring out this whole painting PVC contraption, put it right next to the tank, and she would come right to her corner. She knew exactly what was going on. And in the next slide, you'll see actually her progression. When we first started, she wasn't quite sure how to move Mr. Potato Head. But before we knew it, she was creating these masterpieces of, ombre in different colors, and it was really, really special to be a part of. Here are some other minor projects that I did while I was at Hatfield. Obviously, they aren't as cool as the other ones, but I think they're still important to mention. But basically, a seed pen takedown, another very sensitive invert. Collection trip, SOP. When I first started, I had no idea what to do. I didn't know where to go. I had just moved to Newport, so I was very new to the area, and so I added some locations and maps and where you could find each animal and what time of the year each animal must be collected, because you can only find perch in June and you can only find maybe pipefish in March. It's very specific when you can go collecting. And so I wanted to make sure I got that as well. In addition, I had an animal compatibility sheet where, if you needed to move an animal, you could check off and say, okay, well, I can't move an animal in wetlands because perch will eat its eyes. Very specific relationships between fish and inverts. Again, Red Octo Matrix, it definitely parallels with GPO Matrix, and it's provoked and unprovoked behavior, but it's very hard to measure Red Octopus behavior because they are more elusive. You don't get that enrichment time or interaction time like you would with a GPO, so you can't really gauge it every single day. But it's definitely something to have in your arsenal. It's there on the drive if we need it. And then finally, an animal training SOP. I was very new to training fish, and they're a lot smarter. I got outsmarted a lot of times, especially when I needed to catch them. And so I target trained a few, and I tube trained a monkey-faced prickleback, and I just wanted to make sure I wrote down the steps that I took, what I did, what I used to make it easier for the next aquarist in case they had any better ideas. So to wrap things up, I just wanted to talk about my overall experience that I had at Hatfield. I would say I was absolutely privileged to work with the people I did. Honestly, those connections I would probably have forever. I've learned more than I ever have, this past year, and being able to apply what I learned was just amazing. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity because not many people have that opportunity. And I wish I could have stayed longer to help with more projects. We had a crabs exhibit going on, and I really wanted to almost leave my mark at Hatfield, but unfortunately I wasn't able to do so. But more importantly, I wanted to stay and work with my peers and my coworkers. If I could stay at Hatfield forever, I would. But it's definitely a very special place, and unfortunately not every facility is like Hatfield. But I mean, Hatfield is just the best. I can't say more. It's just the best. Well, that about does it for my presentation. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to forward them to my email. It's up on the slide there. I have to say it was a little strange presenting to my microphone instead of an audience, but thank you guys so much for listening to me talk at you. I hope you found it interesting or somewhat cool. But a big thank you to everyone at Hatfield, Colleen, Dr. Tim, Sid, Jimmy, and Haley. We were the dream team. But thank you, everyone, and please, any and all questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to talk more about it with you. Thanks.
Okay, I guess that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I don't see any in the chat room.
I would just say we've had a great set of interns and student aquarists. It's been a pleasure to work with everyone, and I look forward to keeping in touch with everybody in the future. And really great set of projects too.
Good job, guys. It gave a great overview of a little bit about what we do, which is crazy because we do so much. And so I do like that all your presentations were varied, very different. But hopefully it gives everybody, our colleagues, an idea of all that goes on. And there's a lot that goes on. We do way more than just feed fish and clean tanks. So great job.
Very diverse program.
So I have a question. Who does feed the fish?
We do that too. Yes.
Oh, and so you also clean the tanks then?
We do that too.
Oh,
Yes, so the presentations are just assuming you know all the regular daily tasks that we do on a regular basis. This is, their focus was on all the extra projects that they had worked on in addition to just the daily tasks of animal maintenance and exhibit maintenance. On a regular, although they didn't experience it that much, sometimes we do presentations and help out with the octopus presentations, do tours. Usually, yeah, so we do a lot in just a regular daily task, but Jamie and Haley and Mina did a great job on thoroughly explaining some of the all the other just random things that we have to do on a day too.
That's great. And also, do they work with the volunteers at all?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have some husbandry volunteers. Of course, they're not working with us now, but they help with water quality and kind of other sort of daily husbandry tasks around the facility, primarily in the West Wing. But, so we actually kind of miss them. They haven't been around in a long time.
Yeah, it's been an interesting 6 months. Obviously, we all know that COVID-19 is going on, and as essential staff, the husbandry team has been here the whole time. So our work has not changed at all. Our tasks haven't changed, our priorities and our duties. So it's very important that we had our interns already set up and planning to be here at that time. If we didn't have that in the works, we would be in trouble in the past 6 months. So they were a huge part of the team.
Oh yes, and and they help you. You heard about some of the projects. Another project that maybe we can tell you about another time is the I guess Jamie alluded to working on the new hospital quarantine room, but that's moving along quite nicely now, and so we'll have a hospital quarantine facility that will really be rank up there with a number of the major public aquariums in terms of what we're able to do there.
I have a quick question. Are there things that you were able to do that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise given the shutdown?
I think moving along on, I would say, and you can jump in, Colleen, too. I'd say the aquaponics project and the hospital quarantine room is moving along quicker than it would have if we weren't in the shutdown.
Yeah, I agree. There's projects that we've been kind of putting on our list, and then it's kind of like 1 step forward, 3 steps back. 1 step forward, 3 steps back. That's our normal year. So we do have an ongoing list, and there's projects that are just like, oh, okay, maybe next year. Okay, maybe next year. But we have been acquiring the proper tanks that we need for this hospital quarantine, and this shutdown gave us that opportunity to kind of focus on that. We did. In April, when this happened, we consolidated a lot of our tanks and a lot of our animals just to make it easier on us, because we also had to change our staffing schedule just early on, and we didn't know if just being near each other was gonna get everybody sick. We changed our staffing so that we were overlapping and barely seeing each other. So we had to make it so one person could do the job for the few hours and then pass it on to the next person. So we still had all our regular daily tasks of these animals. We just had them all consolidated into maybe fewer tanks. But with that, then we finally got a little, not that we got lazy about it, but we started understanding, okay, we can change this. We can be in the same room with each other with the masks on, just you be on this side of the room, I'll be on that side of the room. We can still talk each other and walk each other through. And that helped, I'd say that helped Jamie and Haley out, because the weird part of them coming in as interns is a big part of it is our direct face-to-face mentorship to them. So that was something we had to, it was challenging at first, and it is still challenging through the whole time, but we had to maneuver and change things around so that we could still do the mentorship we need and give them what they needed as students to continue on with their careers and get something out of this internship versus just cleaning a tank and feeding a fish. So I'm so happy you guys didn't focus on that at all.
something I guess to add on that, if I can. The other thing that I touched on it very briefly, but with our touch pool animals and a lot of the animals that get a lot of traffic with guests, being able to focus more on their welfare and health and such without guests, because we had attributed some of the things that we had seen during summer to guest numbers, which I have no doubt influenced it, but seeing that some of these same issues occurred without guests made us focus more on the things that we can control versus what we can't control, which is guest volume. So that was also something really interesting to have during this time. That was kind of an unintentional bonus, I guess, to the situation that we're in.
And it really helped us to begin to clarify these welfare protocols. And I don't know how many of you know, but within AZA accredited institutions, welfare, they are now required to maintain accreditation to have welfare assessment protocols for every animal in the facility, including invertebrates. And so we've kind of already moved ahead on that. And so this was a great opportunity, and Haley was interested to start developing some standardized protocols for evaluating crustaceans. And so it's really helpful. And then the fact that we didn't have visitors, it helped, as she said, it's helping teasing out some of the things that maybe we would attribute to visitors that wasn't really the case.
I'd also like to add, for Mina's project, she focused on our giant Pacific octopus painting. So a lot of that was within the first week of shutdown. It was thought, how can we keep our visitors engaged? So it was kind of our push to keep visitors checking out and checking in on Monday. So we turned it into a regular Monday presentation. We kept the presentations at the same time at 1 o'clock. Monday, Thursday, Saturday, with no change. So hopefully our visitors could still use the cameras online and the octopus tank as a way to engage with us and still know that we're still around. So, but it also was fun for Mina and us. So. All right, any other questions from anybody? All right, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. That was it's great numbers. As I said before, we usually just have this in the Gwynn Library, and we only get maybe 10 people seeing this every year. So we get some more engagement from everybody joining us. So a little insight as to what we do. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.